Sober October, day 21. Help from God. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us. No matter how much we tried, our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. That's an excerpt from the AA Big Book, and it echoes the first 3 steps of AA, which we covered in the previous podcasts. We admit that we are powerless and that our lives have become unmanageable, and we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, and we surrendered our will and chose to rely on God. This term higher power captures an attribute in God that many religions and religious people tend to miss. A lot of people tend to focus on the moral and the performance piece of religion. God has rules, God gave us said rules, and we have to follow said rules. Do that, and you will have a good life, you will go to heaven, or whatever. Some people can get away with following the rules. Good for them. But those of us who are actually human, we struggle with powerlessness, unmanageability, and crazy thinking. We do not have what it takes to follow the rules and figure out life and measure up to some standard. So if you're one of these people, welcome. Let me offer you a solution that has helped many people like us. We need help. We need help from outside ourselves, and it's going to come from 2 sources, God and others. The term higher power captures how God isn't just some moral lawgiver. He's powerful. He's the source of power. He's the source of help, and the one who guides us and enables us to walk the path. Help comes from outside ourselves. On our own, we're powerless. But with the help of God, there is power to navigate life. In the Powerlessness podcast, I mentioned when Jesus says, with man, this is impossible, basically teaching that we are powerless. But he follows it up with, but with God, all things are possible. He teaches that God has the power. Personally, this is what I believe. My help comes from Jesus. In Jesus, I have found the forgiveness I need. I have found the grace for my mistakes and my wrongs. I have found the love that I desperately need. And I have found power and help from believing and relying on him. And he helps me walk the path, navigate life. If you want the full backstory on who I am and how I got to this point, you can check out the first 4 episodes of the Church Basement podcast, where I tell that full story. But here's the gist. My life changed when I accepted that I was a wreck and that it was my own stubborn effort and will that got me there. And this was nothing I personally, on my own, could do anything about. My own personal experience echoes what the Big Book says. But we found that such codes and philosophies, meaning religion, did not save us. So no matter how much we tried, our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Self-sufficiency failed me. I was a Christian long before I got into recovery, but I was a self-sufficient Christian, attempting to follow Jesus on my own, by my own might and effort and will. So be better, try harder, do more. That's not what came out of my mouth when I was teaching, but that is what my actions reflected. My true beliefs in my heart were, yes, I believe God loved me, but he probably didn't like me. I had to prove myself. Yes, I believe Jesus saved me, but I still kept at my personal self-salvation projects. Yes, God was powerful and his spirit available, but you know what? I got this. And that is what failed me. That is how I ended up in recovery, not because of necessarily wrong beliefs, but because of a wrong object of my trust, which was myself. When my life bottomed out and I was introduced to these first 3 steps, and I actually embraced them and put them into practice, things changed. My life changed. I started to change. And I began to see how change was possible. It's not from me doing something, trying harder, or trying something new. It's from me relying on something outside myself. This is what some call a spiritual awakening. For me, it seems more like a rude awakening. For alcoholics and addicts, it's the truth that you, by your own might, by your own will, by your own efforts, cannot overcome this thing called addiction. For people who might not call themselves that, but have identified alcohol as a problem, this is an opportunity. You don't have to bottom out and experience the rude awakening You can simply choose, if you're able to get help from outside yourself, from something bigger, more powerful than you, and that is God. The truth is, a spiritual problem needs a spiritual solution, not more willpower. That just makes things worse. When we looked at powerlessness in that episode, I used what Paul wrote in Romans 7 to show how we really are powerless. This is part of being human. It's our condition that we have as humans. He says, "For I have a desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out," in verse 18. And then you can probably relate. I know I can. I want to stop and live a life I know I ought to live, but I just can't seem to. It's frustrating. And he captures that frustration, but he doesn't stop. He points to a solution. In verse 24 and 25, he says, "Wretched man that I am." What great language. "Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death?" And he says, "Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord." He then goes on in Romans 8 to paint a picture of what relying on God looks like and what it means to walk in his Spirit, what it means to connect to God's power. This realization that you are hopeless on your own and need God is an important moment. For most of us, until you get to this point where you wake up to reality, you will continue to trust yourself and you will continue to feel frustrated. But those who are fortunate to experience this spiritual awakening and this rude awakening, they have the option to live a different life. Not one lived from self-sufficiency, but a life lived from reliance and dependence on God. So, great. You might say, that's all fine. You've made your point. What does surrender look like? How do I do it? In general, you stop trying to control things you can't control. You stop avoiding problems that you have. You stop running from God, the source of power. You take steps that require trust and reliance on him. And you can do that because he's good. You start trusting others that he puts in your life. And you start trusting God with the outcome of your life rather than trying to manipulate and control and change everything yourself. In recovery, we have the 12 steps. And when we take these actions, they put us in a place that requires this sort of attitude and this sort of commitment, which is why they're so effective for so many people. They take us outside ourselves to a place where we have to rely on God and have to rely on others, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode. I'm just really scratching the surface of what surrender looks like because honestly, I've been doing this for almost 7 years and I'm still learning. This is a process, and it's a process we enter into. The point of this episode is really to show you this is what it takes. Surrender and turning to God and relying on others, which is where we're going next. But that's it for this episode. Hope it gives you some perspective on your attitude towards trying to handle whatever problem, whether it's alcohol or not, but whatever problem you're going through in life and how maybe you're stuck because trying to handle it on your own. There is help. It's available from God and others. As always, thanks for listening. See you next episode.